wheel throw, and that means that we need to practice wedging so that we don't have any air bubbles in our clay. So we're just going to come right here to our canvas. So you are going to need a piece of canvas, and then you're going to have your clay ready and prepped for you. So this clay is already pre-wedged, but for the wheel, we actually need it into a sphere. So I'm going to start squishing it down, and when you guys go to wedge your clay, that's the term, wedging. Okay, you can take your hands and you're essentially tipping it up and then pushing it forward to compress and roll it forward. So after you do that once or twice, maybe a couple more times, and then I like to teach my students how to use the cube method. So the cube method means that you're just going to throw it down in the shape of a cube. So as we're throwing it down, that clay is compressing and pushing the air bubbles out. So we're just going to do that maybe for about a minute. Okay, and then after we have it compressed, then I'm just going to take my hands and kind of smack down the corners a little bit. And now it's time to move to the wheel after we have somewhat of a sphere shape. Okay, so when we move to our wheel, we need to make sure that we have this bucket here to catch any of the remaining excess. And then your little flip or your switch here, you're going to flip it, make sure that it's nice and clean, which this one is not. And you can go up or you can go down. One of our machines, you can only go down, it only has one speed. But for this one, I can turn it on high speed, which is up. And then you're going to need a little baby sponge at your table. So I'm just going to grab my little baby sponge. I'm going to get it wet. And then I'm going to squeeze up any extra waters just so it's damp. And then I'm going to start here in the center of the wheel, and I'm going to draw a straight line out. And this is my students' favorite part because it's so satisfying to watch it. And what we're creating is a little suction cup on our wheel. So now I'm going to turn the wheel off. And I'm going to take my clay and I'm going to try and throw it down and smack it down to the center so it sticks. So once I have it down in the center, I'm going to get my hands wet. And I'm going to wet down my clay. Okay, so after we wet down the clay and we wet down our hands, we're going to turn it on. And we want to turn it on the high speed. And then here's the trick that I teach my students. You're going to take your hands and you're going to stack them on top of each other. And it's down for 5, out for 5. So when we do this, we want to lock our elbows in, kind of tighten up our abs. And we're just going to press down for 5 seconds. And then lift off gently. You'll notice once it starts to stick to your hand, that means you don't have enough water on there. So you just grab some more water. Wet down the clay, and I'm going to press out for 5. And the idea here is that you want to try and push that clay to the center. And I'm going to gently lift off and keep going. Down for 5. Lift up gently. Okay, if you try and lift off too quickly, it's going to create a little divot, and you don't want that. So I'm kind of pushing just with this part of my palm. Okay? I'm going to show you another technique that you can use. It's called the butterfly technique. So you can take and hook your thumbs together. And then what's going to happen is I'm going to push with this part of my hand and this part of my hand. And this one's going to push the clay inward. This one is going to push the clay down. So I'm locking my thumbs in, and I'm just going to push in and down together. Again, notice I've locked my elbows. I have them on the wheel so that they're not moving. My hands are starting to stick, so I'm slowly going to lift off. Add a little bit more water and go again. Okay, so again, I'm pressing in and I'm pressing down. So that's just getting it a little bit more centered. Okay. And now I have a little bit of an air bubble here, so I'm going to do the process of coning up and coning down. That means that I'm going to push a little bit more with my outer hand to cone it up. And then I'm going to now push with my top hand and push down to cone it back down. Okay. Some artists use both hands to do this, like on the outside up and down. I like to use it this way. Whatever is good for you works. Just working to get that centered and get that little air bubble out of there. And you'll know that it's centered when you can put your hands on either side and it stops wiggling. So I'm almost there. I'm just going to kind of carve out this little one that I have. I have a little air bubble here. Now I'm just going to kind of finish out with my butterfly hands. Okay, so now my clay is pretty close to centered. So, actually it is. So now what I'm going to do, I have my students place your hands on either side of your project so far, and all that's doing is just giving you something to stabilize. And then choose which thumb you prefer, and the other thumb is just going to keep the clay from bubbling up. So I'm going to take my thumb here and poke it straight down. So try not to angle your thumb out, get it straight up and down, and you're going to push down until you feel like you have about a 1/2 inch in the bottom. No one's going to know except you, so you kind of just got to feel it. So I'm going to kind of poke it down in there. So, and then I'm going to get it wet so it's nice and slippery. And then here's what I teach, is that you're going to take whatever your non-dominant hand is, and you're going to stabilize by grabbing the wrist and then locking your elbows down here. And you're going to use your pointer finger and your thumb. And what's going to happen here is I'm going to put my thumb down here at the base again just to stabilize on the wheel. But my pointer finger in here, we're just going to make a little hook outward. So I'm not going to push my thumb in. I'm going to pull my finger out towards my thumb. And what's happening is I'm going to start doing what's called opening. Okay, so I have my little donut underneath, and if you were to reach in there, it would kind of hook underneath. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that it's wet on the sides again, and I'm going to lock it in. And now I'm going to start pinching my fingers together slowly and slowly moving up my walls. Okay, and you'll notice it's going to start curling up a little bit. When you get to the top, the trick is not to just like let go. You need to slowly lift off. And so I'm going to do that one more time. Okay, again, I got to make sure. You can also use your sponge to kind of help with this process to wet down. And now I'm going to go again. So I'm pinching my thumb and my pointer finger together and slowly lifting it up. Okay, now I have it to a point that when I get to the rim here, I can kind of put my pointer finger there and just kind of pinch it off. But now I can start working with both hands. It's big enough for me to get my hand inside of there. So my preference is you have a guide hand, and then you can use whatever fingers are strong for you on the inside. And what you're creating is you're going to push towards your guide hand and kind of smush that clay between the two fingers. And now I'm slowly going to start lifting upwards. And I have an air bubble in there, so you just got to stand firm and lift it up to the top. And then as you get to the top, again, you're just slowly lifting off. Okay? Now when you pull, a lot of the time you'll have your guiding hand a little bit lower than your fingers that are on the inside, so you can pull that clay up. So now it's a little dry. I'm going to add a little water again. Okay? And I'm going to start at the bottom because there's a lot of clay down there, and I'm going to push a little bit harder at the base. And then I'm slowly going to start lifting my hands up towards the top, and the top is thinner, so I'm not going to push as hard. And when I get to the top, I'm going to ease off. So this is a traditional bowl shape. If I wanted it to be more out, I'm just going to change the angle from up and down to sideways and start pulling my hands outward to make it more of a bowl, okay, or a plate. Okay? If I wanted it taller, I have to do the opposite. I have to cup inward. So for example, if I want to go taller, I have to push with my guiding hand a little bit more and push it in. Okay? So I have a lot of extra clay down here. You have modeling tools at your desk. What you're going to do with this step is I'm going to make sure the wheel spins away from my tool, so my tool has to go on the left side here. And whatever angle you want to cut at, okay, I'm going to hold it with two hands, and I'm just going to cut into the base here, and then trim it off. Okay, this extra can just go in this little bucket here. So again, I just kind of introduce it slowly. You really got to hold on to the tool, otherwise it's going to go off away from you. And then kind of pull it out and away. Yeah, I'm just going to carve in this way now. Just grab all that extra clay. Okay. And now, if I feel like this is the shape that I want it to be, I can take my sponge, just make it damp, and I'm going to soak up any extra water that I have on my product. So I'm just slowly putting it on the inside here, soaking up that extra water, because if we leave that water in there, it's going to crack, and then when we go to fire it, it might explode. So I'm just kind of slowly putting that in there, just letting it rest. This is also a good way to get, if you have that little poker in the middle there, you can push it down. And then you also do it on the outside. Make sure, again, your wheel is spinning away from you as you go up the sides. And then you can do your rim. Okay, so you just gently hold it there. And then my last step for you is if you want to add some fun decorative details. Maybe I want to make it a little funky on the outside. We have what's called a needle tool, which I realize we don't necessarily have one on this table here, but you could use even a loop tool too, and you could just kind of slowly introduce it into the project, and you'll notice it's going to go around and create like a little pattern. Okay, and then I could take my sponge if I want it to be a little bit smooth and kind of knock down that little guy that I have there. But now I have a little pattern piece. I'm gonna grab my needle tool. You want to see, some students, they like to just hold it on the side here, and then if you go like up and down, you can kind of create a rough texture that way if you want to add a little bit to your cup. So when you're done, if this is how I want it to be, I'm going to turn my wheel off. Okay, I don't have any extra water. I have my piece I want it. Then myself or my helper are going to come around with a wire cutter, and we're going to cut it off. So with the wire cutter, that means that we're going to take it and we're going to press down on the wheel head as tightly as we possibly can, pull it through just once, and then we have what are called pot lifters, and we're carefully going to introduce one of the pot lifters underneath, slide your project off, okay? And then what we do is we're going to put a paper towel down on the square in the back of the classroom and put this project on top of that paper towel so that it doesn't stick to the plastic. We have to let it dry for 1 day, and then we come back and trim the bottom, okay? So I'm gonna just put this off to the side here. Let's talk about cleaning the wheel. So when you go to clean the wheel, we have green buckets that are just right next door. You're gonna take the big sponge that's in it, empty it out. You can use it to wash your hands there really quick to get all that extra clay off. And then, this is my favorite part, you're gonna turn your wheel back on. And everyone loves those satisfying videos. So you're just gonna put it right here in the middle, and you're gonna push down, and you're gonna draw a straight line out just like we started. Clean that wheel head off, really pristine. Okay, so start in the middle, pull it straight out. Then you can turn it off, use the big sponge, and you just push everything down into the bucket, the drop bucket that's here. Okay, so it should be 100% clean. Everything along the tray edge, so this would be the tray edge, needs to be wiped off and clean. Everything gets pushed in there. And then we also need to clean our tools. So you can either use the little bucket that's at your table, or you can use the big bucket, but you're going to take all the tools that you used and wash them. Please don't drop them in the bucket or leave them in the bucket, okay, because we don't want to lose our tools when we go to dump our buckets out in the drain outside. Okay? And then once they're 100% clean, you can leave them nice and neatly on the red washcloth. Okay, so organize them up nice and neat. These ones are teacher tools, so I would just wash these and return them back to the front table where we got them from. Okay, so that's how we do the wheel throwing process. That's how we clean up, and I'm excited to see what you're gonna make.